Hello my friends, it's diys-by-dar, and I finally have enough pottery pieces painted that I'm ready to go ahead and put my glaze on. So I'm going to go ahead and take you guys through the process of the type of clay, the type of underglaze, the type of glaze that I'm using. I've been doing this process for 30 years, so I'm ready to share my tips and tricks of how I learned how to paint underglaze stains on my low fire clay. So let's get into it. Here is the clay that is one of my favorites. It is from Runyan Pottery Supply here in Michigan, and this is a low fire clay called SC125. Just disregard those socks. Here is the glazes that I typically have liked because they are gloss clear glazes, and they have gone to this LG10, which is a clear transparent, and I'm not liking it as well as their other one, which was just a super clear, which they don't make anymore. Here's a tray of underglaze stains and some bottles or lugs, liquid underglaze from Amaco. These are my colors that I use when I want to color and paint on top of this clay. The trays, they're called smugs or semi liquid underglazes, and it reminds me very much of just watercolors. And when we look over to where I've got my lugs all in a tray, you can see how messy that looks, but there's a reason for that. I like to use water to change how opaque the color is, which is a trick that you use on top of your pottery. So the first step, I know you can't really see it, but I have the impression from the leaf there. And the first round, I'm just getting that color on there just to stain that whole leaf. And basically, you're just coloring in the lines. And once I get that first layer down, I'm going to go ahead and take it to the sink and rinse it. Sometimes I'll use water and I'll wet that piece first. And what this does is it helps that liquid underglaze travel. The clay, the bisque is very porous. And if I fill some of those pores up with water, it will help this liquid underglaze stain travel a bit better through osmosis. So I know it's not really in the lines, but that's what you're shooting for when something's really, really tiny. This is a tiny pendant. When you rinse it off, it'll all be okay. But with this underglaze, the green is a very unforgiving color. And if you drop your paintbrush on top of the bisque clay someplace else, it's going to stay there. Here I'm using my finger and I'm just kind of dabbing at it because it's a trick of putting the underglaze on and using your water to take the underglaze off. And there we have it. Now I can go ahead and try to go back and paint some of the details in a little bit better because this just looks a little bit flat to me. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in with some orange. And you can bet that that real messy looking tray I've got over there, I put a couple drops in my orange color. And I kind of like whirled it off on the side where it looks all messy. So I just have the right amount of underglaze on that paintbrush so I can go back in and put a little bit of orange on here. And once it gets fired, you will see that really a lot of the orange burns out on you. So let's get this painted. I'm just rubbing that in or down, so when I go back with this next layer of brown, I can use all the little dents and indentations from that leaf impression to take my brown back into all those tiny little veins to get this leaf or leaves to really pop. Very opaque, a lot of water from here on out to get that brown. You can see the water laying on top of there, to get that water to take some of that brown out of that area in the middle of the leaf and move it around just a little bit. Time to glaze. I'm going to use that LG10, which is the new glaze of choice for Amaco for their clear. And the first layer, I will usually do the bottom first. And this glaze, you can pour it, you can spray it, and you can brush it. So I will always start with the bottom and put 2 really nice thick coats on the bottom. These are dry-footed pieces of pottery, just meaning wherever the bottom is going to hit on the table, I leave it free of glaze, but the inside is completely glazed. So it usually works out pretty well. There's not a problem. Now, the first one over the top of that underglaze, you don't want to smear it, so just real light. Just don't even drag that brush across it. Just kind of set some of that glaze on the top and let that dry. So then when you know you're going over with that next coat, your underglaze stain is not going to move. It's going to stay right where it's at. I'm just going to go around and finish up that first coat on the top. That needs to dry, and here's that second coat. Now I'm really going to hit them leaves a little heavier because I want every little crook and cranny to have some of that glaze in there, and always watch to make sure you don't have something land on there. Get the edge all the way around, and I'm going to put 2 coats on these, and there it is, and I'm going to let it set there so it can dry. I have the lid up, and what I would suggest is there is a hole right there, and we had to redo the area down here, and I had a strap on there that I clipped to hold that door up, because if you're down and you're trying to set stuff way down there on the bottom, and for whatever reason you hit that chain, you wobble that top, that can come down and clunk you on the head, and that's not a lot of fun. I had it happen once, so I need to find my rope and put it back up there. But this is where I'm going to be putting the first layer. Down there I have one shelf in there, so I'm going to start to load it. Getting ready to take them down and put them in. Check them over. Make sure you don't have any brush hairs, any dirt that drop down, and you want to rub your finger across any pock holes or holes that are open and it's kind of chalky. I've put 3 pieces down in the bottom, and then you can see I put 4 stilts in there. That is going to hold the second shelf. And over there you can see that little thing kind of sticking out. That is where the temperature is regulated, because this is a digital kiln. I don't have cones where they're a specific temperature that they will melt, and then they melt and they will shut off a switch inside the kiln. Mine is just all digital, and I'll go through that when I get to that point. But you need to get that shelf above that temperature sensor. So you can't really tell from here, but these are probably a good 2 to 3 inches above that. So I'm going to continue to load up the rest of this on what I can, and then we're going to get that second shelf in here. Okay, I'm pushing it a little bit because some of the stuff that I have in there is, still a little bit wet and still drying. So I'm just going to ramp this kiln up to maybe 300 degrees and then just shut it off. And then I'm going to open all of the peepholes or air holes so some air can get in there. There's 3 of them on there, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn this on. Okay, I'm ready to ramp this up to the temperature, and I have closed the lid. The holes are just open just a little bit, just to let some air circulate through there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it back on. And right now it's at 292 degrees. The main reason I wanted to let it heat up just for a little bit was it's kind of cold down in this room, and I had some of that pottery wet from water when I was painting on it, and I wanted it to dry out. So I'm going to go ahead, and the glaze that I'm using says that it needs to be fired to cone 05. So on this digital perfect fire, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit select. And I took it to 1940 degrees for my bisque fire. I want to go to cone, so I hit the cone button. Now that takes it up, this takes it down, so I want to go to cone 05. All I gotta do is hit enter. I go to delay time. Well, wait a minute. cone 05. Enter. There we go. That's going to take it up to 1888 degrees for that cone 05 firing. I hit select again. It's going to want to know if I want to delay time on it, and I don't. So I'm not going to enter any time in there. I'm just going to hit enter. I'm going to hit select again, and it's going to be rate per hour. I probably will go down, go a little bit slower, like 200. $200 degrees an hour. When I hit select again, whenever you use a cone, it's going to automatically go to that soft fire feature. But you can put time in if you want, like how many minutes you want it to do it. Like 10 minutes for a hold at the end. When it reaches 1888 degrees, it's going to stay there for 10 minutes and continue to heat and hold it there before it shuts off and starts to back down. That's all we have to set. I'm going to hit start. It's almost at 300 degrees now. So in an hour from now, it'll be at 500 degrees. And by the morning, I'll be able to go ahead and probably shut it off. But I'm going to let it completely cool down. Always let your kiln completely cool down. I know you like to try to push it and see what's in there, but you let that cold air rush in there, you take a risk of having your pieces crack. So we'll see what we got tomorrow. Night, everybody. Finally, I can open the top. That is always the most fun. Taking a look in there and seeing, wow, did anything get screwed up? Looked pretty good, and there's the one piece there that has red maple leaves going all the way around it. That was a guest piece. I've always allowed people to come into my home as groups and allow them to make some pottery, so that piece is in there with the rest. There's my cross with some lily of the valley. Now, when you go to take those shelves out and put them in, it's always a little bit of a trick. You gotta be really straight with it. You don't want to hit it on the way down so you knock debris loose and it lands on the top of your pieces, because then it's going to be messed up, which you're going to see in a second here. And there was my second layer. That turned out pretty nice. And you can see all my pendants around the bottom. I just kind of used the space and fill with smaller pieces. Nothing can touch in there. It has to be free of glaze, and there you have the naughty piece. I had a piece fall on there, and the best I can do is try to chisel it off and put some more glaze on it and refire it, and maybe I can save the piece. But that's what happens. Here is our piece that we were working on. Really beautiful. Well, the next couple weeks, since I really can't get at much furniture to do, I am going to get a surf prep. So I'm going to go over the surf prep, but I may be doing a painting and some jewelry next. Here's my piece. help me out. Like and subscribe.